developers. This time I'm going to have a talk about marketing. Please, Rodrigue, explain us how to market our games.
So I'm Rodrigue. I am the marketing and publishing director, who you might know as the publisher of Spiritfarer, which came out in 2020.
Yes, I played it on my channel, so some of you have seen it. When did you join the company?
I've been here. This is going to be my 6th year, so since 2016 in August.
And was Spiritfarer the first game you worked on?
No, so the studio itself was founded in 2014, and our first game was released in 2015, and it's called Jotun. We came out with a second game called Sundered in 2017, and Spiritfarer was therefore our third game.
Have you worked also on the other game?
Yes. So as soon as I came on, we released Jotun like a month later on consoles. It had just come out on PC on Steam in 2015, but in 2016 we released to PS4, Xbox, and Wii U. Remember Wii U? Anyway, we came out on Wii U.
That's a while ago.
So I worked on that. I did the full launch for Sundered and the full launch for Spiritfarer. So I did work on all three.
What is your role during the development?
At the highest level, I'd say that marketing and publishing is there to make sure that you know about the game. We can't convince you to buy it, but our job is to make sure that everywhere you will be and everywhere you might look, the game is there and it's described as it is, so that if you're interested in it, you understand what the game is and you're tempted to buy it. What do I do on the development? Well, the conversations about what the game is and who the audience is, those start at the very beginning. So for Spiritfarer, we can talk about this a little later, but say we started talking about it internally, developing it late 2017. So already at that time I was there, and you have to talk with the developers and the creators of like, okay, what exactly is the game? Who are we making it for? And marketing sort of helps in those conversations. And as time goes on, and then we're ready to actually reveal the game to the world, there's a lot of preparation to that, but a lot of it has to do with your, marketing understanding of who the game is for, and therefore how you're going to talk about it. So the first time it comes out, you want to make sure that it is representing the game as it is. So you have to start that conversation and that work long before, looking what other games are out there, what players are playing those games and why, what they love about it.
I noticed like a lot of indie developers, like solo indie developers, often they say, yeah, the marketing was like hard because they started like very late. But if I hear this correct, you guys already started with the marketing.
Yes, the general wisdom is that it's never too early. So to be clear, marketing doesn't start as soon as you're talking outside of the studio. It starts inside, and you're talking with the dev team the whole time, so that once you're ready to actually talk to the community or media or post something on YouTube, you're ready to actually have a conversation with the community and these people.
How does an average week look for you?
It depends where you are in the production, right? If you're already out trying to continue creating visibility for the game, like you want to make sure, okay, let's see if there's an opportunity to reach out to an influencer or to media here. So discounts that we want to put on the game, say on the Switch store or on Steam or whatever, sort of work to make sure that it's constantly visible, that it's constantly represented on stores. So there's a lot of work that's sort of administrative in that sense. But if the game isn't out yet, then there's a lot of research of other games. There's a lot of financial projections. There's a lot of checking out what other games are out there, what's doing well, and how are they presenting themselves. There's a lot of talking to companies like Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo to see what opportunities might be available at a date in the future when you're ready to release.
I noticed when I played it, it felt a bit like a very Japanese influenced. I also noticed a bit Ori and the Blind Forest, the owl as the bad guy. Like, has it been on purpose, or like, do I see this correct?
I don't want to simplify the inspirations, because there are a lot. The way that I see it, we're working in the same style, right? If you want to talk directly about Ori, it's a side scroller. It's got this lovely sort of style that is influenced by old animation movies and stuff. There's a lot of DNA at the creative level, like at the very inspiration level, that I think we share. But say Ori, and like the first Ori had already come out when we had started doing Spiritfarer, is a tough action Metroidvania game. It's in a different universe. It doesn't feel the same.
But like the Golden Dragon felt a bit, to be honest, like Ori and the
I
Black
could see that,
Forest.
and and say people have mentioned Gris and other games like that. The mood of it, people talked about Animal Crossing, and generally the answer that I have to that is rarely do indie studios say, I want to do that game, I'm going to try and do that game. It's more like, especially indie has a lot of retro influence, right? We think about the games we loved when we were kids. Okay, how can we do something like that, except change this, change that, and other influences? So the easiest way I could describe the inspirations for Spiritfarer is like every studio is going to come at it from a different angle. In our studio, all three of our games start with two things. First, sort of like a mythical inspiration. In our first game, it was Norse mythology, like it was Viking mythology that we started with, and we saw what we wanted to do with that. In our second game, it was H.P. Lovecraft, and we wanted to be a lot darker. And in Spiritfarer, it was Greek mythology and the myth of Charon, ferrying the souls to the afterlife. In the same conversation, as we're talking about what sort of stories inspire us, not like what story do we want to tell. It starts with what stories inspire us, and then we see what we want to tell. At the same time, it's like, what kind of games do we like, or would we like to try? And so our first game was a boss rush game. We were interested to see if we could do something like a Souls-like boss rush game. The second game was a Metroidvania, because we were like, why isn't anybody making Super Metroid anymore? And then for Spiritfarer, it was like, okay, so we have this idea of Greek mythology, but also, say, Spirited Away, the Studio Ghibli, the Miyazaki movie. That was a huge influence. But the third thing was like, what about Animal Crossing? What about Stardew Valley? All these sort of things, like farm sims in general, like something, because we had come off of a H.P. Lovecraft hard Metroidvania type game, and we wanted something softer and lighter and more wholesome sort of thing. So we all these things come together, and it takes a long time to actually understand what we're making, right?
So did your target audience change over the years?
The target audience is going to change project to project, but even inside the project, like I say, like it's a conversation that you have like a basic understanding of what you're trying to do at the beginning of the project. And so there's a hypothesis on the side of the production and the developers where it's like, okay, let's see if we can do this and how we can do this. So while that's happening, marketing is like, okay, let's see who might like this. And that is also a hypothesis, because if the production sort of evolves and you see, okay, we want to do a little less this and focus more on these mechanics and that type of game, the people who will love it, who could potentially love it, changes as well. So the hypotheses of what is the game and who might like it have to evolve in parallel. So that's basically what it is. Game development is so complex. I mean, I say often, it's a miracle that these things get actually completed. The ones that are legitimately great is a miracle times 10. It's so, there's so many different moving parts and different teams and different individuals that need to work together to make it a thing. It's sort of like this weird evolving thing, and then I don't know, sometimes maybe in the middle of production, okay, now we understand what we're trying to do, and usually there's like a proof of concept, like a vertical slice that is supposed to represent most of the game. You're like, okay, this is what we want it to be. Before you get there's a lot of conversations, a lot of hypotheses, and that both the dev team and marketing need to look hard at and keep on testing to see if it makes sense.
So what do you think is the marketing success?
The simplest way I could put it is we had the time to go through the process that I just described. It was not a simple game to explain.
Yeah, because it has so many different elements.
Exactly. That was a challenge. So what I'm saying here is like, it was a challenge inside the company for us to understand, okay, what exactly is it? Because you can't say our game is 10 things. Here's the 10 things our game is. You need to say like, okay, no, but what is it if you go down to its essence, if you synthesize exactly what the game is, this is what it is. And you need that while you're making the game, because you have to keep the focus. If you don't have the focus, then you're not doing everything well. You're trying to do everything at once. Trying to understand what the game was internally, and then trying to understand how you tell someone else about it. Because generally the problem with games and marketing, and this isn't unique to games marketing in and of itself, It's that you understand the game because you made the game, right? You've spent literally 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, whatever years making the game. You've been living it. You know what it is. So it's very easy for you to understand. Someone else who just, is clicking through and sees it on YouTube or sees it on Steam or whatever, they have 2 minutes to understand what you've taken 3 years to go over in your head. And that's the challenge of marketing and games in general. It's the simplest games are easy, but if they're too simple, then people aren't going to be interested, or is okay, well, I already have something like that, so why would I bother? The challenge and I guess the success that we had with Spiritfarer is like we had this time to first understand what the game was. And then we had the time from the moment that we were ready to announce it and be helped by bigger companies than us who got the message out. So we were helped in the beginning, but then we had a year to keep on trying to explain to people what the game was before it was actually out.
And did it change over time? Because you played the game as well, right? So
Yeah.
Did your opinion about the game change?
It did. I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like the day that we announced it, say at E3, that it was perfectly understood in our team what the game was, because it is a dialogue with the people outside, with the community who are reacting to it. So we come out on day one with our first trailer. And you want to see how people understand, what are they understanding about it? And so the first trailer didn't say everything about the game. It said some like specific thing, like learn how to say goodbye. That's what we wanted people to understand. And if you just said learn how to say goodbye for a year, then they haven't understood everything about the game. They've only understood that one thing. So you start with that first thing, and then you're like, learn how to say goodbye. It's a farm sim. It's also a platformer. It's also a narrative game. It's tough to get all those messages out. So in the marketing, like, okay, this period with this trailer, we're trying to communicate this message. And you support that with, we're going to do interviews with media so that they also communicate this message. And then you're going to say, like, we have our newsletter or social media or our Discord, and we're going to say the same message there. So there are periods where you're trying to make people understand this specific elements of the thing. And then at the end, when you're ready to release, you're like, here's everything. You remember we told you it was this, that, and now it's here. And you're going to hope that people have understood all that. In real life, though, people only saw one of those messages, or it pops up on the front page of Steam, and it's the first time they see it, because we're not Activision, we're not Call of Duty. People don't see it everywhere, even if they're not looking. With indie games, often they see it once, and you have to make sure that you have been practicing this entire time to say, like, okay, how's the simplest way I can say the most clear thing about what this game is? And you make sure the trailer communicates that well, and you make sure the art communicates that well. And if it is true to what the game actually is, and it's something that people might actually like, they'll be tempted to buy it. So the challenge there is make sure you're saying stuff that's true, because if they buy it and it's not what the game actually is, they're not going to be happy. It succeeded because we had the time to try and get the message out and say exactly what the game was, and that it was true to what the game was. That's the basic thing.
Which kind of marketing tools can help with marketing your game?
There are a lot out there. So it's a few. The main ones that I would say is, our trailers are our strongest sort of individual tool to put out there, right? Because the trailer you're giving to everybody that might be able to push it. So as I said, we revealed our first trailer at E3, and so we give that to Microsoft, and they put it in their E3 keynote. Ironically, right after a Cyberpunk trailer played, they started with the Spiritfarer trailer, which is really weird. So the first tool is like you make the assets or the visual things that you can give to the people with larger platforms than you, and hope that they put it out there. So that's one thing. The second and very important thing, especially for Spiritfarer, which is something that we wanted the community to really be excited about and love, is our newsletter. So,
like, what do you put in the newsletter?
Again, it's like it depends what your game is and the voice that you want to do. But for Spiritfarer, it was very important for us that we have a dialogue with the community, right? So the way that we do our newsletter was not, here's an image, we'll see you next week or whatever. It's, here's something about the game, talk to us. So our newsletter was always like, here's something about Stella, the protagonist of the game, and a little about her story. So we ask, do you have any questions about this, or something a little more specific, like who's your favorite character? And then we invite people to talk to us, and then newsletter. And if you do this on a Twitter or whatever, it's like you're reaching one person, and it's in 140 characters, and it's quick and it's disposable and it floats away. The newsletter is like something arrives in your inbox, and it's some guy. And for most of the campaign, it was me, and then we had this great community manager, Med, come on, and he became the voice. But it was really like, talk to me. And then we'd have like these like exchanges of emails between individual members of the community and us. And that was very, very important for us to try and get people like, it's okay, this is like a dramatic game touching on sensitive subjects, but we're human. Like we're not trying to make you sad or whatever. We're trying to get you to feel these emotions.
When I left A Spirit Away, I was like, especially the first one, because you don't really realize that, like, okay, wait, this person I'm not going to care for anymore. I felt it.
So this was the plan. You know, we knew that if we just put it out there, it's tough for some people. So we wanted to have that to be available for people, to be like, hey, you know, you really made me feel things. It's like, okay, well, it's cool. It's you know, it's fine. But if it was more of like a one direction sort of thing, like you put this out on Facebook and there's no real conversation or whatever, it wouldn't be good for Spiritfarer itself. So we wanted to have a place where people could come and have a conversation with us. If you have another game that's, say, multiplayer or whatever, we're going to want something else. You're going to want to go on to Discord and say, like, everybody talk together, because that's more of a like, I'm playing with you, you're playing with me, and everybody needs to talk together. But for Spiritfarer, it was more like a, you know, I'm sad. It's not like a crowd thing. It's a more personal thing. So that's why we went with a newsletter.
So wow, you just emailed back the people that mailed after the emails that were sent out.
Yeah, and it was private, you know? Like, yes, we have our main message, but then we're like, if you want to talk to us, we're here. It was one of the principal tools that we used, and we have all the rest. We do have our Discord, we do have our Twitter, we do it, but generally it's like we had our trailer that we share with everybody, and we have the newsletter that was to talk directly to the fans, so that when the game comes out, the people who have been talking to us for almost a year are like, I must buy this game. Like it's so obvious.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, so you just connected really with your target audience, basically.
Yeah, we were trying to anyway.
It's very vague, of course. Like, how many emails? Any
well,
estimation?
It's structured, right? It's planned. We don't log in the morning and say, I think I'll send out an email today. Like, obviously, during the entire campaign for the 12 months, it's like we know that there's news coming on specific days. So those are planned in advance. Like 4 or 5 different times in the year, it's like, here's the big news. The rest of the time, we're just inviting people to come to the newsletter. Like, come to the newsletter and we'll give you this thing, just a little book, a little PDF that tells you more about the characters. So that's one email. But then that email says, what's your favorite character? And we're hoping people will answer us. But whether they answer us or not, a week later, there's another email. It's already planned. It's already written. So everybody who subscribes to the newsletter, whenever they happen to subscribe, they get the same 10 emails in a row. And that is all done in advance. Like you create all those emails in a row, and you make sure that people will, over, say, 2 months, they'll be getting an email every week from us. Some people will respond, some people won't, but that's just 10 emails. Like, it's not huge. A lot of the big time spent by myself and Med, our community manager, is responding to people. Because it's not the creation of those 10 emails, it's the 200 responses you get on that one email that you're like, you know, some of them are long responses. So you have to also do long responses to them. And sometimes it just happens that way. So, you know, I am sure that we answered a few thousand emails from people.
Impressive.
I mean, some of them are simple. It's like, great, keep up the good work. It's like, thanks, have a good day. That's it. But others are like, I just lost my father. It's like, oh, you know, do you want to talk about it, sort of thing. And we could speak about that because the stories were inspired by people that we knew. So that was part of the creative process. We weren't just like, hey, what if someone died? It was, no, I had this person that I lost. So so let's create a character that inspired by that. There was a lot of that in the game.
Maybe I'm wrong, but is it that in the credits also those names are listed?
Yeah, it was a beautiful creative process that the team put together. Like the head of the project was like, I'm going to talk to the members of the team who would want to talk about the people they lost, and he would interview them for a couple hours, just trying to understand who the person that was lost was. And then there's this conversation, would you like to have this person or parts of that story be in the game? So it wasn't like the people you see listed in the credits, that is this character, but it's more like this part of that person's story is there. That is the list of the people that inspired the stories.
Wow, yeah, I'm impressed. Now I understand why the marketing takes so much time. Okay, so if we're talking about time, like how many days of the week are you working on the marketing, and how do we need to see that?
It depends where you are in the project. Say now we are working on a new project, and since we're only like 2 years until we're going to release it, like I'm not working on it every day. I'm working on several things at once, but some of it is like I'm still working on Spiritfarer to make sure, okay, what are the next sales going to be? How are we still making sure the community knows we're out there? How are we, in our case, say if you have to do patches, well, marketing has to be part of that too. So we're still doing that. So in a given week, you're still working on projects that you released 2 or 3 years ago. You're working on projects that are coming in 2 or 3 years, and there are various other things that you do during a production cycle. So it really depends. So when it's say 3 months before launch, 5 days a week, you're just doing that one game. That's for sure.
Basically crunching marketing as well.
Yeah, it's the only difference between development and marketing is that marketing continues after launch, whereas the development starts ramping down, right? You're going to start doing patches, you're going to do DLC or whatever, but generally, slowly that the dev team moves on to the next project, but the marketing is still on full time for the project because it's trying to create interest and make sure that the game is still out there so that it can still sell. So it's a form of crunch. It's in parallel, but a little out of phase from the actual development.
And did I notice that there are added more companions?
Yes, that was part of the plan too. I mean, this is like, I guess, another way of looking at marketing as well, because we had to have that conversation after we launch. What do we do with Spiritfarer? Do we keep on making stuff for it? Do we move on to other things? Once we saw how much people loved the game and how successful it was with people and with critics and awards, we've never had this before. We should create more content for it. Then the conversation, which includes marketing, is like, do we sell it or do we just give it for free? And the question of, well, what's best for the game comes up. So we did ask the community, like we did surveys with the community to see what would you like us to do with Spiritfarer now? And generally people were like, well, we want more spirit. Like that was number one thing. It was decided that we would make more spirits for it. Then it's like, okay, when are we going to do it? How are we gonna add these things to the game? So it was like, okay, well, it's for the year after launch, which was the year that we just had, 2021. It's like we're gonna do an update in spring, an update in the summer, and an update in the fall, and those would be extra spirits. And the marketing was planned around that. And then at the end, with our last update, we added a subtitle to the game, which is Farewell Edition. So it's like we're saying goodbye to Spiritfarer for now, and now it's complete. That was the logic behind it.
What have you learned from this whole marketing cycle from Spiritfarer? Like, has it been similar with other projects?
It's always different. It will be different depending on the project and what type of marketing the project needs. There are things that are similar. Having to bring a really difficult Metroidvania to market is not the same as trying to bring something that's a narrative, emotional game in a very real sense. Spiritfarer had more potential. It cost us more investments and time to make. So then the marketing has to grow too, to make sure that if we're putting this much into the game, we have to put more marketing into the game, and we have to think about it more closely and try and do everything at once. Spiritfarer was the first game that we launched on every system at the same time. Our previous games were like, okay, PC first and then console, or PC and just PlayStation and we'll do the others later. For Spiritfarer, it was everything at once. So that changes your marketing too.
All those different consoles or platforms, what do you think is most successful?
It depends what the game is, obviously. In Spiritfarer's case, we identified straight away that Nintendo was key, because we know that, like, say, the Animal Crossing sort of cozy game thing was doing especially well on Switch as we were making Spiritfarer. So we were like, okay, well, we have to try and get some sort of partnership with Switch and make sure that they understand as well. It's like, we think this will do well on Switch. Here's why. And that, so Nintendo will be like, well, yes. So then we'll put you in a Nintendo Direct or whatever and make sure it works. And so there's a chicken and egg sort of thing, where it's like, if the console or the company pushes something on their store, it's going to do better there. In our case, you want to make sure that the key consoles are pushing it as much as possible, and you put most of your effort to try and make that happen. So in our case, we were on Xbox Game Pass, so the game did very well there. Game Pass is a subscription service, so anybody who has that subscription can play, so that makes a lot of people play there. Microsoft were also the ones that revealed us in E3 and kept on supporting us with their marketing, so it did very well there. We always make sure that Steam pushes us to the front page if they want to, and they can, and that helps PC perform super well. Generally, historically, all our games have performed better on PC than any console. But Spiritfarer was almost half and half PC and Switch, that because that's where the main effort was, to sell the game. Obviously, a whole lot of other people who did not buy the game but played it on Game Pass because they had access to it. After all that, you have PlayStation, which did not support us to the same level, or at least we weren't able to reach that understanding with them. So they did help us, but it was not, say, front page on PlayStation at all. So it didn't get seen, and therefore it didn't get bought. Sort of like the key of indie game marketing.
Convincing the publisher.
Well, basically convincing the console or store, because it's great to do all this marketing that I do and make sure that your community knows it's out there. These are your first number one fans. If, say, Steam or PlayStation puts the thing on their front page, there are millions of other people. And to be clear, we don't have millions of people in our community. We have a few thousand, and it's great. We need those people to love the game because they're who we made it for. But if you want the game to be a great success, you need PlayStation to put it on the front page, because people don't dig in PlayStation Store to see like that little game that nobody's talking about. Some do, but it's rare. Most people are like, I wonder what this is, because it's in front of their face. So the key there is to understand that the things that are put front page, it's not by accident. It's because Sony has decided to put it there. Nintendo has decided to put it there. You try and maintain these relationships with them and make sure that they understand they are going to make money if they put it front page. But obviously there are hundreds of other games who are saying the same thing, so they have to decide. And so to your point, Nintendo, it seemed pretty obvious. Look at this sweet, cozy, colorful game. It makes sense. They saw it, we saw it, everybody was happy. PlayStation maybe that week was looking for something, I don't know, like Hades or something a little more gritty.
But it has a bit of Hades. I mean, like the Charon and like the characters a little.
Absolutely.
Like the fishing. The fishing.
Yeah, that goes back to our to what I was saying before. We're all inspired by the same things. We love fishing games. We love Greek mythology, and there's something about the art of Supergiant and Hades as well, which resembles us. We love the same things. So these things look similar, but generally you try and avoid being like, I want to do their game. It's more like, what's my game?
Like, what would be your advice for people that don't have like all the money to like launch a big marketing campaign?
Honestly, I understand that people do what they're good at. If you like game design, do game design. If you want to do programming, do programming. The problem is, it's this idea that just because you're good or you're making a good game, it will be successful. And it's like, there's just too many games now. There's too many games. The only answer is to make a great game, but also market it at the same time. First thing is understand understand that. Understand that it's not enough to just make a great game. There are too many great games. There are so many great games out there. You need to find ways to get more people to see your game, and that's what marketing does. It doesn't happen naturally just because you're awesome. It happens because it's work. Yes, that's boring, but it's like the game doesn't program itself either. It doesn't program itself. It doesn't design itself. It doesn't market itself. That is impossible. So understand that. The second thing is budget some time. I know you really want to just program the game, but you have to budget some time to market the game all the time. As soon as you're ready to show it to people, you start marketing it to people.
Some people are afraid that if you share too soon your game on social media, that other people will copy it.
It is a risk. If you weigh that against, I will tell nobody until it's almost ready. What I said before is like, you have to start early in indie because you have to keep on repeating your message and make sure more and more people hear it. If you just come at the last minute and say, I have a thing, not many people see it. It's not because your thing is not good. It's because people are everywhere and they're never at the same place at the same time. There are rare events like an E3 where everybody's looking at the same time. The Game Awards, everybody is looking at the same time. But how many indie games manage to get there? And how many indie games manage to be remembered instead of Elden Ring, instead of whatever awesome AAA game is out there? So the only answer for indie is like, do it early, do it often, and do it all the time until launch. There's no other way. Yes, you are going to have exceptions, but it is not a plan to be an exception. Like, you're not going to be Valheim. Valheim is Valheim. Stardew Valley is Stardew Valley. To think that you are going to be Stardew Valley, or to think that even Stardew Valley thought it was going to be Stardew Valley, they didn't. And say Valheim had no idea they were going to blow up the way that they did. It's just, they were happy, but it came with its own troubles of being like, it's good troubles to have, and like, obviously, but still, you hope that you're going to be that game, but you don't plan on being that game. You plan on doing the work. It's work. I hate to say it, I'm paid to do work, and it is a full-time job. From the outside, it's easy to think like, well, it just sort of happens, and it doesn't. It's a full-time job. I fully believe that as wonderful as Spiritfarer is, if we had not done the marketing, it wouldn't have done half as well, because it's a numbers thing. You need more people to know your game. You need to explain to people why your game is awesome. Otherwise, you're just hoping that they'll understand. And it's like, in life, that just doesn't work. How many awesome games did we play last year? How many awesome games did we not even know exist? It's a weird time to be in indie games, but it's great. Like, as players, we have a lot of choices, and people are busy, and people get sort of like absorbed into games for like 2 months, and they don't even look at other games. What if you're announcing your game during that time? They just missed it. They didn't even see it. That's why you do it over a whole year. At some point, they're going to be like, hey, what's that? That looks like something I'd like. In the case of Spiritfarer, any game, you sell it to X number of people at once, but then it keeps on selling. Like, where were these people who bought it a year after when you launched it? Like, where were they? Did they know it was there? Maybe not. It shows you that there's so many gamers out there. Understand that you're not communicating to them all at once. So that's why marketing plans are that long. You hope that some people will see it once and be like, oh, that's interesting, and maybe he'll move on. And then 2 months later, he'll see it again. It's like, wait, where did I see that? And then 2 months after that, he'll see it again. And then it's starting to really get into his head or her head. And then when you actually launch, then you're there. But that keeps on going after launch, because if you get an award, or if you put on sale on Steam, say 6 months after launch, that might be the first time someone sees it. That doesn't mean they're going to buy it then. That means now they might remember it. But the reason they might remember it is because two months later, you have more news, or you have another thing that comes out. So it's really numbers and time. It's just the smartest way to make sure that you're not putting all this time to develop a game so that nobody sees it. It deserves to be seen, and it won't just be seen because it's awesome. It's going to be seen because you did the work.
I heard some people were like, yeah, I have my game on Steam now. I'm like, there are no people look at it. Do I need to now do the marketing, or I just make a new game?
It's a tough question, because you love your game, right? You want it to succeed. But for everything like, say, Among Us, it takes a year and then suddenly it's a huge success. There is literally 10,000 other games that never make it. You got to pick your battles. You got to decide, what do I learn from this? Do I want to try? It's like you can come up with a test. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this this, and this, and see if it works or not. But you have to limit your time. You have to have it structured and if you want to try and put in time and effort and possibly money to market your game after lunch, try if you want, but only to learn, not because if it doesn't work, then it's a failure. It's more like, okay, here's what I have to not do next time. It's always to learn to make your projects better. And the marketing that I did for our first game, our second game, and Spiritfarer, it was different each time, but it was building on what I did well earlier and sort of improving what I did badly and sort of not worrying about other stuff that doesn't apply to that specific project.
Which kind of marketing technique you use, and you were like quite disappointed with the result, and you are like, okay, that I will never practice anymore.
I'd say like one of the classic things for indie is, okay, what if I pay for advertisement, right? Because that's what everybody does in AAA. Have a PlayStation commercial during the Super Bowl sort of thing. And it's like, but they have the money to do so. And for things that are like mainstream and gigantic, you have to make a big splash and stuff. But you can't do that in indie. What you can do is like try and do little advertisements on Facebook, little advertisements on YouTube, so that your thing comes up more often. But the problem with advertising everywhere is it only works in quantity, and you can only advertise in quantity if you pay a lot for a long time, right? In indie, and I think we did this for all three of our projects, we come to the end, it's like, let's see if we can do advertising. And you throw in like a few $1,000 or whatever, and it does nothing because it doesn't work that way. Advertisement is not something that you can really spend
but
for.
that's interesting, because a lot of people say like, oh, the advertisement for Facebook works really well because it's very target based, but you are basically saying like, well, we did it and it's not so successful at all.
Not really. Yeah. I mean, if you compare it, and that's it. It's like there are so many other things and say other partners that have so much better visibility than you. To have Nintendo share their thing on a YouTube costs you theoretically nothing. It costs you the time that you spent to convince them to do it. Facebook, you are putting in money, and you're also putting in the time to optimize your campaign, optimize your audience to make sure that the right people do it. The problem in general with indie games marketing is that you have a hard time proving that you did a thing and that it got you sale. What you can see is like, I advertised it, 10,000 people saw my trailer. Great. Did they then click? Did they then buy? You don't know, because the connection isn't there. It works in mobile games because you have all those things, but on Steam, for example, on Nintendo, you don't know where the people who bought the game came from generally. So it's tough for you if you want to optimize what you're spending to say, I did this cause effect, I just need to tweak that and it's better and better. So it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, and generally it doesn't necessarily reach people where they are. How many people are looking on Facebook to see the next game that they're going to play? Not many.
No. I mean, it's just maybe in your face, but then often you keep on scrolling.
Yeah, so it's tough. It's tough. Again, what I will say is it comes back to the very beginning. Who is your audience? Is your audience the type of person who buys games by looking on Facebook? That audience exists. And if that's where they are and it fits with your game, do that. But don't do it because you can. Do it because it's obvious that that's what will work. I said before, it's like, depending on what game, if you have a multiplayer game, you need to do marketing that is focused on getting them all to talk together so that people get excited together. And that'll be different for a small, cozy single player game like Spiritfarer. It will always depend, but it always has to be done with the intention of who is buying the game, how are they shopping for games. If you have a game that's a much younger audience, go for TikTok, for example. Like, you could do that, but it's time and effort to try and make sure that, the people who you want to see the game are actually looking there. Again, like, if you see something on TikTok, do you then go to your eShop and buy a game? Does that happen often? Like, how do these things change depending on where you are? It's a conversation. It's really like, it has to be done intentionally and intelligently. There are no single answers. It will always depend on what the game is and who the audience is.
Do you think the marketing has changed over the years?
Yes, in as much as there was hardly any indie games marketing, say 10 years ago. Like, indie was doing great 10 years ago, but indie marketing wasn't very necessary because there wasn't as much competition, and you could get seen. Like, if you got a decent project, it was often enough because there wasn't that many similar games. There wasn't that. First of all, indie marketing hardly existed. It was already rare when I came onto Thunder Lotus that we had a full-time marketing guy. Like I had decided I wanted to work in games, but then I would talk to a lot of people in our city. We have a lot of indie devs. We did back then, we still do. And most of them were like, we don't have that position in our company. And Thunder Lotus was one of the only ones that did. So what I am still sad to say is like a lot, I'd say even most indie companies don't have full-time marketing. So that hasn't changed much, but there are more. And what has changed, especially in the past 5 years, I say, is like the amount of people, of indie devs who are talking together about marketing has increased exponentially. It's still the problem that they're trying to do as much as the little that they can in a short period of time, whereas it should be more intentional and throughout the whole process. But at least they're starting to really say like, okay, I need to find ways to get the word out because it's not enough just to make the game. So there are more and more indie devs that are doing this. What I'm seeing today is that there's no one answer to how do you market an indie game, but there are more people asking the question.
It is a bit of the controversial part nowadays, but some people are really talking about NFT. Like, what is your opinion about that?
We haven't really discussed it as a studio. Don't think I've seen any conversations go on internally about that. So this is purely personal. I do not support the idea of NFTs. As much as I understand it, see it more as a scam. I see it more as an environmental disaster. I see it as sort of like vapor that is not bringing anything good into the world. But, prove me wrong.
Exactly. It's just you should ask a marketer about what he thinks about NFT, right?
Yeah, because there are many people out there who are like, I can make money off of this. Great. You can make money out of a lot of things. But, wouldn't you want to make money out of giving something tangible, not physical, but tangible, as in like either an actual object, but also feeling or joy or make you think sort of thing? NFTs is not bringing any of that. So what else do you have? What else are you bringing? If it's just a way to try and get people who have a hard time profiting from their art sort of thing, great. But this wouldn't be the first and best way that I would do it because it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I totally agree with it. I think it's an interesting thing because all around start to talk about it.
With reason. We spent this entire conversation saying it's tough. It's tough trying to make money out of technology, I want to be clear about indie games. We are just it's a luxury product. We're not saving lives. We're trying to create a little fun. It is not like a fundamental need to live. I'm not going to say like everything we do is great. We're not also expending a lot of energy and sort of contributing to climate and whatever, because we're in digital and that, but okay, what else are you bringing into the world is a sort of thing. It's important in my mind.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. Well, thank you very much for all this wisdom about marketing. What would be your last advice?
My last advice is just do it. Do the work. Your game deserves this work.
Well, everyone, thank you very much for watching. And if you have more questions, please comment in the comment section or apply for his newsletter. I hear there are 10 emails and maybe he's going to answer your email. So that will be also fun. Thank you very much for watching. And Rodrigue, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.